Hey everybody, this is my 125 gallon tank and I'm having an ick outbreak in this tank right now, so having just turned the lights on this morning, I'm going through and checking on everybody and seeing how everyone's doing. And I noticed something hanging out of a piece of wood here, and I wasn't sure what it was, what I was looking at. And if you will look right there, you can see this little thing sort of sticking out, and I wasn't really sure what that was. I came around this way, and you can kind of see that is the tail of one of my clown loaches. If you can see that hole in the wood, I know from this angle through the glass it looks pretty strange. Let me open the lid, see if we can actually look right down in there. There's a better look at it. See that right there? That's the tail of the loach. He's up inside a hole in that piece of wood. So I know loaches can wriggle into some tiny little places, and I've actually lost loaches in the past from them getting into places and getting stuck. Sometimes they can't back out, and if they can't swim forward, they sort of wedge in. So I'm going to have to keep my eye on him and make sure I don't have... Oh, there, he just backed out. Oh, that's the big one too. Wow, I didn't even realize. I thought that was probably the small one. So now let's try to find the small one, because I don't see it yet. And the small one was the one that really had it on there. Look, that Congo Tetra right there is just covered in them too. So probably today or tomorrow will be the day that I start getting a little concerned if I don't see these spots start going away. My Tenopoma this morning actually seems to be covered in more spots than he was even yesterday. So he shouldn't be getting worse. He shouldn't be getting more spots on him. Hopefully what will happen was I'll just come down one day and suddenly the spots will be either gone almost altogether, or they'll be diminishing very quickly, and then they won't come back once we get rid of them. The reason being that once the little parasite moves on to its next stage of life cycle, then the fish, the little white spots will heal, and then of course the medication will kill off the ick, and the fish won't get reinfected, and we won't get that secondary wave of spots where you get even more spots coming out on them. So there's one of my that Congo Tetra back there, that big male. You can see how speckled he is. He's got quite a lot of it on him. And one or two of the rainbow fish are pretty heavily spotted. And I've noticed one or two spots, it looks like, on my snakeskin gourami right here. I'm not 100% positive, but there was some little dots on its tail. They could just be little specks of something, or they could be the very early signs of a little bit of ick starting to break out on the tail of my snakeskin gourami. Oh, there's the small loach. I was wondering if he was in there. He's got it pretty bad too. And this one spends a lot of its time just sitting on the rocks, flashing like that, trying to scratch, as I would imagine I would be doing too. In fact, I stand here looking at these fish, and it makes me all itchy and scratchy just seeing those white spots all over them. It drives me crazy. And here's a good look at my Tenopoma. You can see he's almost, looks like he's been dusted with it. He's got so much on there. So, again, if by the end of today or tomorrow morning I don't really start seeing some improvement, we might start experimenting with a heat treatment. I don't know if that's a bad idea or a good idea. I've treated with heat before, and the tank I treated, I really pushed it to the limit. I wanted to see what the fish could tolerate, and I pushed the tank up over 90 degrees. It was between 90 and 91 degrees. I wanted to make sure I achieved a temperature of at least 90, because if I'm not mistaken, 89.5 is the temperature that actually kills the ick parasite outright. And I would imagine if you run it up to a 90 degree temperature, you could probably leave it there for a day or less and then run the temperature back down. Once you've achieved that temperature, it's like boiling something to kill off any bacteria that's in it. You don't have to boil it for 4 hours. Once the stuff's dead, it's dead. Once you've brought it up to temperature, it kills it. So what I did was I ran that tank up to 90 degrees and I left it there for about 10 days. I did a full ick treatment at 90 degrees, when I could have probably done a 90 degree treatment for one day. And the result of all that was not only did a lot of my fish look really rough and it took them a while to recover, but I did actually lose one My Madagascan rainbow fish at the time died, and when I looked into its care parameters, I realized that rainbow fish wasn't supposed to be in water above like 75 degrees. I've looked at these rainbow fish, and of course the Marcy rainbow fish, you can't really find any information on it because they're not a real rainbow fish, but the Parkinson's rainbow fish, the Parkinsoni, is. And that's what these are hybridized from, I believe. And their maximum temperature is like 78 or 79 degrees. So I could probably run the tank up to 85 or 86 degrees, which would be enough to stop it. But that doesn't kill it outright. If I was going to raise the temperature, I'd be interested in just trying to kill it outright to get it out of the fish. If it comes out of the fish naturally, the medication should kill it. And if we're talking about an 85 or 86 degree temperature, that doesn't kill the ick. It does one of two things. There's three temperatures that you need to think about when you're dealing with a temperature treatment for ick. The first temperature, and don't quote me on these, I'm just pulling this out of my head. It's been a long time since I've actually read these. But the first temperature I want to say is 85 degrees. And that is the temperature that actually prevents the swimmers from reattaching to a new host. They will still finish doing what they're doing in the fish here. They will still drop to the bottom of the tank. They will still reproduce, and they will still emerge into their free swimming stage. But at 85 degrees, I don't know why, but at 85 degrees, they're said not to be able to attach to new hosts. And therefore, if they can't attach to a new host, within a few days they die off and the problem's over. The next temperature I want to say is 86 or 86 and a half, and that is the temperature where they can no longer breed. They will finish doing what they're doing on the fish, they'll drop off, they'll fall to the bottom of the tank, but at that temperature, the breeding does not occur, and that's where the chain of the life cycle is broken, and you don't get any more reproduction, and the plague is gone. And then, of course, the magic number is 89.5, I want to say, although that is a radio station I listen to, so I could be confusing that number. But it's really close to 90 degrees is the temperature that just kills the ick outright. It dies. So my understanding is that even if the protozoa, the parasite itself, is still embedded in the fish, if you raise that temperature to 90 degrees, the fish being cold-blooded, they don't regulate their body temperature, so that the fish will raise to 90 degrees. And once everything in that tank is 90 degrees, the ick should be dead. And I shouldn't have to keep it at 90 degrees for several days. So if I do opt for a heat treatment, what I will probably do is just crank the heater up and just watch the tank until we get it up to about 90, and maybe 89 or something like that, get it really, really up there, and then leave it there for the afternoon, and then start bringing it back down, and then drop it back down to about 86, and then we'll leave it there for a few days and see what happens, and that should be the end of the ick. I'm also expecting any day now for these white spots to get off of the fish as the parasite moves to its next stage of its life cycle. It should abandon the fish and fall to the bottom of the tank, where it then begins trying to reproduce. And it will, with the medication, as I've said in previous videos, it will reproduce. It's protected from the medicine while it's in its little reproduction cyst. Once that erupts and it becomes free swimmers, that's when the medication will have its impact. So basically at this point, I'm just waiting for the ick to finish feeding on my fish. It's kind of stressful, but there's nothing I can really do to speed that process up. Now, one of the things that's almost always recommended when you start treating for ick, even if you're using medications, it usually will tell you to turn the temperature of your tank up. Now, it's not doing that they're not suggesting you turn it up for the sake of treating the ick, because you'd have to turn it up pretty high, dangerously high, depending on the fish you have. But almost all fish can withstand the upper 70s. If you're buying tropical fish, they should be able to withstand at least into the upper 70s or low 80s, 80, 81 degrees, something like that. And by turning the temperature up that high, what you're doing is you're really speeding up the life cycle of the ick. So you're not actually helping to kill it, you're helping to accelerate it. The idea being is that we want to get it to that free swimming stage as soon as possible, because that's when the medication starts taking effect. So if you've got a tank that's room temperature at 68 degrees, your fish might be doing okay in there, but the ick is going to really slow down its life cycle, and it might take 8 or 10 days before, it might take 2 weeks before it moves from one stage to the next. And that's a long time to wait while you're medicating the tank every day, waiting for this stuff to move on. So you turn the temperature up, you get it up to 78 degrees or something, from 68 degrees, you add 10 degrees to the tank, and it will dramatically increase the speed with which you move through those life cycles, and you wind up getting to that vulnerable state, the free swimming state, as quickly as possible, and that's the goal here. So this tank is already sits right around 80 degrees. Let me see my that's about as right around 80 degrees as you can get. So at 80 degrees, we're going to be moving along with the life cycle quite rapidly in this tank. So again, by today or tomorrow, it was 3 days ago, I noticed the white spots. And they've been getting worse, which again, as I kind of expected, they're in there eating the fish and doing their thing. And while they're doing that, the fish's body is trying to protect itself. And that's what those little white spots are. They're basically little cysts that the fish's body is forming around the parasites to prevent them from doing any damage to any more tissue. So every one of those little white dots you see is the sign of a little parasite living underneath the skin of that fish, which just, again, makes me want to itch and scratch when I'm standing here looking at it. So, again, at 3 days, I've probably got another day or two to wait before we move on to the next stage of the life cycle. At 80 degrees, we're looking at maybe 3 to 5 days per life cycle. So we're at the 3-day mark now. We're going to have to wait and see where we go from here. So make sure you're subscribed, and that way you won't miss any of the updates. I've been doing pretty much daily morning updates on this tank, and I've got another tank that is having some issues right now too that I've been updating a lot, and you don't want to miss any of those updates either. So thanks again for watching this one. See you real soon in the next one.